The Last Mile Motel, this is a true story. My name is Eduardo Reyes. I am a truck driver, and I am telling you this from a place that should not exist at a time that never moves forward, waiting for something that has already found me. 3 years ago, I stopped at a motel in the middle of the California desert. That motel was not on any map, and what I saw in the bathroom that night was not human. It was not animal either. It was something that I still do not have a word for, something that defies every category my mind tries to place it in. But I know one thing for certain. It never let me leave. And right now, as you listen to this, it is waiting for you too. They say truck drivers are the loneliest people in the world. We drive thousands of miles every week crossing state lines and time zones, but we have no one to talk to except the crackling static of AM radio and the endless rumble of diesel engines beneath our seats. The highway becomes a kind of companion, but it is a cold one. It takes everything and gives nothing back, except more asphalt, more distance, more solitude. And on those late nights when the road stretches endlessly into darkness and your eyes start playing tricks on you, you begin seeing things. Shapes at the edge of your headlights, figures standing motionless on the shoulder, faces in your rearview mirror that vanish when you look directly at them. Things that in the daylight you would dismiss as exhaustion, as hallucination, as the natural consequence of too many hours behind the wheel. But at night in the desert with nothing but darkness pressing against your windows from every direction, everything feels possible, everything feels real. I never believed in ghosts, not once in my 38 years on this earth. I never believed in the stories my colleagues shared over warm beers after long hauls gathered around sticky tables in truck stop diners across the American Southwest. Stories about phantom hitchhikers who disappeared from the passenger seat. About pale figures standing motionless on roadsides at 3 a.m, their eyes reflecting headlights like animal eyes watching the trucks pass without moving a muscle. About knocking sounds on cabin doors when the truck was parked in empty lots miles from the nearest town knocking that continued even when you shouted that no one was there. I would smile and take another sip of my drink and tell them their imaginations were working overtime. Too many hours alone, I would say. Too much coffee and not enough sleep. The mind plays tricks when you push it past its limits. That was all. I was a fool. I understand that now. I was a fool who thought the world operated according to rules I understood, rules of physics and logic and cause and effect. I did not know that there are places where those rules do not apply, places that exist outside of everything we think we know. I did not know about Room 12. My story begins on a Thursday evening in March of 2019. I remember the date precisely because it was exactly 2 months after Carmen left me. And I had been counting the days the way a prisoner counts the days until release, except I was not counting toward freedom. I was counting toward nothing, just marking time because I did not know what else to do. I was sitting in my cramped apartment in San Diego, a one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled perpetually of mildew and other people's cooking. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's television through the plaster, some game show with a host whose enthusiasm felt like mockery. I was staring at the wall where my wedding photograph used to hang at the rectangular patch of paint that was slightly lighter than the surrounding area, proof that something had been there once. Carmen had taken the photograph when she moved out. She said she could not build a life with a husband who was never home, and I understood. I really did. I was never home. The road was my home. The truck was my home. This apartment was just a place where I stored clothes and slept between hauls. The apartment felt hollow in a way that had nothing to do with missing furniture. It was the kind of emptiness that settles in your chest and makes breathing feel like effort. The kind of emptiness that makes you realize you have built your entire life around something that was never really there. My phone buzzed against the coffee table, breaking the silence. A text message from my mother in Tijuana, her words appearing on the cracked screen like a verdict. Mijo, the hospital called again. They need payment before Friday or they will cancel my dialysis appointment. I'm sorry to bother you with this. I know you're working hard. I checked my bank account already knowing what I would find. $847. My mother's dialysis treatments cost $1,500 every month, regular as clockwork, because that was the price of keeping her kidneys functioning, of keeping her alive. She'd been sick for 3 years now, ever since her diabetes progressed to the point where her body could no longer filter its own blood. Without those treatments, she would die. It was that simple, that brutal. I had been driving trucks for 4 years at this point, working for Desert Crown Logistics out of San Diego. It was a good company as trucking companies went. Fair wages, decent benefits. The dispatcher, Don Mauricio, was a reasonable man who tried not to push his drivers too hard, who understood that exhausted drivers made mistakes, and mistakes in this business could be fatal. But the work was brutal regardless. 12-hour shifts that often stretched to 14 or 16. Days away from home that blurred together into weeks. The constant pressure to deliver on time, to make the schedule, to keep the cargo moving, because commerce never slept and neither could we. I had just finished 2 consecutive hauls in 5 days, back-to-back runs that had taken me from Los Angeles to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix to Albuquerque. My body felt like it had been fed through a meat grinder. My shoulders ached from gripping the wheel. My lower back throbbed with a pain that had become so constant I barely noticed it anymore. My eyes burned from staring at endless miles of highway, from fighting to stay awake through the small hours of the morning when the body's circadian rhythms demanded sleep. My doctor had warned me about chronic sleep deprivation during my last checkup 6 weeks ago. He was a young man, earnest and concerned, and he had looked at me with genuine worry as he explained what I was doing to myself. "Your reaction times are declining," he said. "Your cognitive function is impaired. You are a danger to yourself and to everyone else on the road. You need rest, real rest, at least a week off, preferably 2. I had nodded and thanked him for his concern and walked out of his office knowing that I would not take his advice, could not take his advice. Rest did not pay for dialysis. Rest did not keep my mother alive. Rest was a luxury for people whose loved ones were not depending on their next paycheck for survival. My phone rang, the sudden sound making me flinch. Don Mauricio's name appeared on the screen. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Eduardo." His voice came through, tinged with the apologetic tone he always used when he was about to ask me to do something I would not want to do. "I know you just got back. I know you're exhausted, but I have a job, and I need my best driver." I closed my eyes. "What is it, major client?" "Big contract. The kind of account that keeps the company profitable for the next fiscal year, if you understand what I'm saying. The cargo is heavy specialized equipment for a mining operation up north, and your rig is the only one we have that is rated for this kind of weight." He paused. "Double the usual bonus, Eduardo. I would not ask if there was anyone else." I thought about my bank account, $847. I thought about my mother in that hospital in Tijuana, sitting in a chair while a machine cleaned her blood because her own body could not do it anymore. I thought about what would happen if she missed even one treatment. Where to small town up in Northern California, up near the Oregon border. 3 days out, 4 nights on the road if you take the standard route. You could shave some time if you use the alternate highways, but I will leave that to your discretion. And when do you need me to leave tonight would be ideal. The client is anxious. I opened my eyes and looked around my empty apartment at the bare walls and the silent television and the kitchen where I had not cooked a meal in months because there was no one to cook for. "I will take it." I could hear the relief in Don Mauricio's voice. "You are the best driver I have, Eduardo. I mean that. Be careful out there, okay? The weather reports are showing some storms moving through the desert. Keep your eyes open." I ended the call and began packing. 5 bottles of water because dehydration was a constant enemy on long hauls. 3 lunch containers that I had prepared myself simple food that would keep without refrigeration because Carmen was not there to cook for me anymore and I had never learned to do more than the basics. A carton of cigarettes, a habit I knew I should quit but could not quite manage. A thermos of black coffee strong enough to strip paint, and my Zippo lighter, the silver one with the worn edges and the faint scratch on the lid. Carmen had given it to me for our 5th anniversary back when she still believed our marriage could survive my constant absences. It was the only possession of hers that I still owned. Before walking out the door, I noticed something peculiar. The bathroom light flickered. Just once. A quick stutter between illumination and darkness so brief I almost thought I had imagined it. I glanced up at the fixture, frowning. Probably just the bulb burning out, I muttered to no one. I grabbed my keys and walked out, pulling the door shut behind me. Behind me, unseen, the light flickered twice more. Then it went still. Friday morning, 3:47 a.m. San Diego slept beneath a moonless sky as I pulled out of the company lot, the Peterbilt's diesel engine shattering the pre-dawn silence. The truck was 12 years old, a 379 model that had seen better days, but it was reliable in the way that mattered most. It started when I turned the key, and it kept running no matter how many miles I put on it. The paint was a dark burgundy that looked almost black in low light, and the chrome on the grille was pitted with age, but the engine was strong, and the brakes were good, and that was what counted. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness as I merged onto the highway. On either side there was nothing but void, the kind of absolute blackness that you only find in the hours before dawn, when even the street lights seem to dim in exhaustion. Highway signs drifted past like green phantoms, their reflective surfaces catching my lights for a heartbeat before vanishing into the darkness behind me. I switched on the radio, scrolling through static until I found a country station that was still broadcasting at this hour. A song crackled through the speakers, something about empty highways and nobody waiting at home, and I almost laughed at how perfectly it captured my life. The static buzzed beneath the melody like insects trapped behind glass, a constant reminder that I was far from any major city, far from the reliable signals of civilization. The cabin smelled of aged leather and stale coffee from trips past. There was another odor, too, something faint and metallic that I could not quite identify. I sniffed the air, trying to locate its source, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Probably something in the cargo, I decided, and dismissed it from my mind. The first day passed without major incident. I followed Interstate 8 east as the sun rose behind me, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that I watched in my side mirrors. Then I merged onto Interstate 10, heading north through the Mojave Desert. The landscape unfolded around me in shades of brown and gold, vast and empty and ancient. Joshua trees dotted the terrain, their twisted branches reaching toward the sky like figures frozen in attitudes of prayer or supplication. There is something about the desert that makes you feel small, that reminds you how insignificant human beings are in the face of geological time. I had driven through this landscape hundreds of times, but it never failed to humble me. Then in the late afternoon, the sky began to darken, not the gradual dimming of approaching evening. This was something else. Clouds piled up on the western horizon with unnatural speed, black and swollen, and before I could even think about finding shelter, the storm was upon me. Rain hammered down with a violence I had rarely experienced. Not droplets, but sheets of water slamming against my windshield so hard that the wipers were useless, just smearing the deluge back and forth without clearing my view. I could barely see beyond the hood of my truck. I reduced my speed to a crawl hazard, lights blinking knuckles white against the steering wheel. The rain pounded the roof like fists, trying to break through like something angry, demanding entry. I lost 4 hours to that storm. By the time it finally passed, the sun had set and I was well behind schedule. Worse, I had drifted from my planned route, taking unfamiliar exits to escape the worst of the flooding. The GPS on my phone displayed only a spinning circle, and the words, "Searching for signal, the satellites apparently having abandoned me, along with the daylight." I pulled over to the shoulder and retrieved my backup navigation from the glove compartment, a paper map from 2008, creased and faded and probably obsolete, but better than nothing. I unfolded it across the steering wheel and squinted at the faded lines in the glow of my dome light, trying to locate my position. After 10 minutes of study, I identified what I believed was my current location and plotted a new course. A smaller road marked on the map as State Route 78 alternate. It wound through empty desert, bypassing the main highways, but if the map was accurate, it would eventually connect to my planned route and save me time in the process. This should work, I told myself. That was my first mistake. The road was empty in a way that felt intentional, curated, as if someone had removed all evidence of human presence specifically to unsettle anyone who traveled it. Not just quiet, not just peaceful, empty, like a held breath. Empty, like a room where something terrible has happened and the echoes have not yet faded. No other vehicles passed me in either direction. No trucks, no cars, no motorcycles, not even the distant glow of headlights on the horizon. Just cracked asphalt cutting through desert that stretched to every horizon. The road a pale gray ribbon beneath my headlights, everything else swallowed by darkness. Occasionally I passed other signs of the landscape. A cluster of boulders, the bleached skeleton of some large animal, its bones scattered across the sand like an abandoned game. A road sign so faded I could not read it, its metal surface scarred by decades of wind and sand. But nothing alive, nothing moving except my truck and the shadows it cast. Around 9 that night, about 2 hours after full darkness had fallen, I witnessed something that I still cannot explain. Another truck appeared on the road ahead, coming toward me from the opposite direction. My first reaction was relief, evidence of another human being, proof that this road led somewhere, that I was not completely alone. But as the truck drew closer, relief curdled into something else. It was a Peterbilt, the same model as mine. And as it entered the range of my headlights, I saw that it was the same color too. That same dark burgundy, almost black in the darkness, the same chrome details on the grille, the same shape of the cab, the same silhouette against the night. I pressed my horn in greeting. Truck drivers always acknowledge each other on lonely roads. A flash of lights, a tap on the horn. It is a code, a small kindness, a reminder that even in the middle of nowhere, you are not entirely alone. The other truck did not respond. It passed me without slowing, without any acknowledgement at all. And as it drew alongside my cab, I turned my head to look at the driver, to wave or nod or offer some human connection. The windows were completely dark, no dashboard glow. No figure behind the wheel, just blackness behind glass, as if the cab were empty, as if the truck were driving itself. Then it was past me, vanishing into the darkness behind. I checked my rearview mirror, expecting to see its taillights receding in the distance. The road behind me was empty. The truck had vanished, as if it had never existed. "You need sleep," I told myself, rubbing my burning eyes with the heel of my hand. "You are hallucinating, that is all, just exhaustion playing tricks." But something cold had settled in my stomach, a weight that would not shift, no matter how many times I told myself there was a rational explanation. I pressed the accelerator a little harder and kept driving. By my second full day on the road, I had entered territory that matched nothing on my map. According to the faded paper spread across my passenger seat, State Route 78, alternate should have connected to a larger highway within 50 miles. I'd been driving for hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. I was losing track and found nothing. No intersection, no junction, no sign indicating distances to any destination. The road simply continued unchanging through a landscape that never varied. Just the road, the desert, and a sky that pressed down like a suffocating weight. I began to notice other strange things as the hours passed. The sun set in a blaze of color around 7 in the evening, painting the western horizon in shades of fire and blood before fading to purple and then to black. But the darkness that followed was absolute in a way that desert nights usually are not. There were no stars, no moon, not even the faint glow of distant civilization on the horizon, just void pressing against my windows from every direction. I checked my watch repeatedly. 10:47 p.m., 10:52 p.m., 11:01 p.m. I had been driving for nearly 18 consecutive hours. My eyes felt packed with sand. My hands trembled slightly against the wheel, a fine vibration I could not control. Every few minutes my head would begin to droop toward my chest, and I would jerk awake with my heart slamming against my ribs, swerving slightly on the road before correcting course. Find somewhere to stop, I commanded myself. A motel, a gas station, a wide spot in the road, anything. But there was nothing. Mile after mile of nothing. I was preparing to surrender, to pull onto the shoulder and sleep in my cab despite the discomfort, despite the vulnerability. It was dangerous to sleep in a truck on an empty road. You never knew who might come along, what might happen while you were unconscious and helpless. But I was past the point of caring. My body was shutting down whether I wanted it to or not. Then I saw it. A light. A faint amber glow in the distance, perhaps 60 meters from the main road. I blinked hard several times, certain it was another hallucination, another trick of my exhausted mind. But the light persisted. It was real. It was there. I slowed the truck and turned toward it. As I approached, the glow resolved into shapes, buildings, a parking lot, and a sign illuminated by neon tubes that buzzed and flickered in the darkness, casting shifting shadows across the desert floor. Motel New Hope Bowl, California. Below that, in smaller letters, vacancy. Except the letter V had burned out, leaving only _Akency, a gap like a missing tooth. I pulled into the parking lot and killed the engine. Silence crashed over me like a wave, complete and absolute. No crickets singing in the brush, no wind stirring the desert sand, no distant rumble of highway traffic, nothing but the tick of my cooling engine and the electric hum of dying neon. I sat in my cab for a long moment, staring at the motel through my windshield. Something about it was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in the primitive part of my brain that still remembered what it meant to be prey, but I could not identify what. It was just a motel. Old, certainly. Neglected, probably. But just a motel. I stepped down from the cabin, and the night air struck me like walking into a freezer. Cold. Far colder than any California desert night should be, even in March. The kind of cold that ignores clothing and settles directly into bone, that makes your teeth want to chatter and your muscles want to clench. My breath plumed white in front of my face, each exhalation a small ghost that dispersed immediately into the darkness. I looked around, trying to understand what I was seeing. The motel was larger than it had appeared from the road. Art Deco architecture from the 1950s, all curved walls and decorative flourishes, and the kind of elaborate design that had gone out of fashion decades ago. The exterior was faded pink stucco, cracked in places, stained in others. Chrome accents caught the neon light and threw it back in distorted patterns. The kind of establishment you might find in vintage Las Vegas postcards, back when the desert city still held glamour instead of desperation. But this was not Las Vegas. This was the middle of nowhere on a road that apparently no one traveled. Why would an elaborate motel exist here? Who had built it? Who maintained it? I noticed other details that should have sent me back to my truck immediately. The parking lot was empty. Not a single car, not a single motorcycle, not even a bicycle leaning against a wall. A motel operating at 11 o'clock at night with absolutely no guests. The entrance door stood slightly ajar. Not fully open, just a gap of perhaps 3 inches, as if waiting for someone to push through, as if extending an invitation. And there was the smell. When I had stepped down from my truck, an odor reached me that I could not immediately identify. Old flowers. The cloying sweetness of blossoms left too long in stagnant water, their petals browning and soft, their fragrance turned to something sickly. And beneath that, something else. something that reminded me of the meat department at grocery stores, that iron and copper smell of fresh blood, something organic and wrong. A chill cascaded down my spine, not from the temperature, from something deeper, something instinctive. The ancient part of my brain that still remembered what it meant to be hunted to be prey was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my truck and drive until the sun came up. "Come on, Eduardo," I said aloud, my voice sounding thin and unconvincing in the silence. "You are a grown man. Ghosts do not exist. This is just an old motel, nothing more." I walked toward the entrance. My boots crunched on gravel that seemed too loud in the stillness. The neon sign buzzed and flickered above me, casting my shadow in strange directions, making it dance and twist. The air grew colder with each step, and that smell, flowers and meat sweetness and decay, grew stronger. I reached the door. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The lobby was smaller than I expected, cramped and dim, as if the walls were closer together than they should be. A dark wooden counter occupied the right side of the space, its surface scarred with age and what looked like water damage. Above it, a single lamp cast anemic yellow light that seemed to struggle against the darkness, illuminating a circle no larger than the counter itself and leaving the rest of the room in shadow. Two armchairs upholstered in red velvet sat against the opposite wall, their fabric worn thin, in places stained with age and substances I did not want to identify. A small table between them held a lamp that was not turned on its shade askew. The wallpaper drew my attention next. It covered every visible surface, a pattern from the 1960s of large blue flowers against a mustard yellow background. But the paper was peeling in numerous places, curling away from the walls in long strips to reveal gray concrete beneath. It looked like skin separating from muscle, like something dead that was slowly falling apart. The smell was stronger inside, mildew, heavy and damp, cheap perfume, the kind used to mask unpleasant odors rather than to please, and beneath both of those that metallic undertone I had noticed outside, like old pennies, like dried blood. On the counter sat a small silver bell beside a handwritten sign, the letters faded, but still legible, "Ring for service." I crossed the lobby, my boots silent on a carpet I had not noticed dark red and thick, and pressed my palm down on the bell. Ding! The sound rang out sharp and clear, far louder than it should have been, echoing through the lobby and down corridors I could not see. As if the entire building were hollow, as if it were listening, as if my presence had awakened something that had been sleeping. Silence rushed back in. I waited. 1 minute, 2. No one came. I pressed the bell again. Ding! The same sharp sound, the same echoes, the same silence afterward. 3 minutes, 4. The exhaustion that had been building for days pressed down on me with physical weight. My legs wanted to fold, my eyes wanted to close. My body was screaming for rest, for sleep, for the oblivion that only unconsciousness could provide. There were 2 chairs against the wall, red velvet, stained but soft-looking. I will just sit for a moment, I told myself, just rest my legs while I wait for someone to come. I walked to the nearest chair and lowered myself into it. The cushion was softer than it looked, enveloping me, supporting me. I leaned my head back against the top of the chair. I did not intend to fall asleep, but I did. In my dream, I was driving again. The Peterbilt's engine roared beneath me, the vibration traveling up through the seat and into my bones. The headlights cut through darkness ahead, illuminating the road in their familiar way. But the road was wrong. It was not asphalt anymore. The surface beneath my tires was red and wet, glistening in the headlight beams like fresh meat. Something squelched as I drove over it. Something that looked like muscle, like exposed flesh, like the inside of something that should have been kept inside. And standing along both shoulders of this nightmare road were figures. Dozens of them, hundreds, lined up like spectators at a parade, motionless, watching. They had the shapes of human beings, the general outline, head, shoulders, arms, legs. But their details were wrong. Where faces should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth, dark voids like holes cut in the fabric of reality. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just emptiness. They were watching me. I could feel their attention like pressure against my skin, even though they had no eyes to see with. They were watching and waiting. Then one of them stepped onto the road. It stood directly in my path, that featureless void where its face should be turned toward my oncoming truck. I tried to brake, tried to swerve, but my body would not obey. My hands were locked on the wheel, my foot frozen above the pedal. I was going to hit it. At the last instant, the figure raised its head, and where there had been nothing, where there had been only void features, began to emerge. A face, a child's face, round and soft with the features of an infant. But the proportions were wrong. The head was too large, the skin was too pale, almost gray, and the eyes were enormous. The size of tennis balls, bulging from their sockets, straining against the lids that tried to contain them. Pure white. No iris, no pupil, just glistening white orbs shot through with red veins. The mouth opened. It screamed. I woke, gasping, lurching upright in the chair with my heart pounding against my ribs. The lobby was darker than before. The lamp on the counter seemed dimmer, its light barely reaching beyond the wooden surface. The shadows in the corners of the room had grown deeper, more substantial, as if they had weight and mass. For a moment I did not know where I was. The dream clung to me, those white eyes staring from a child's face, that scream echoing in my ears. Then memory returned. The motel, the lobby, the bell I had rung. I was about to push myself out of the chair to ring the bell again or simply leave, when a voice spoke from directly in front of me. I apologized for the delay. I jerked backward so violently that the chair nearly tipped over. My heart, already pounding, accelerated to a speed that felt dangerous. A man stood behind the counter. I had not heard footsteps, had not heard a door open or close, had not heard anything at all. One moment the counter had been empty, the next moment he was there as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. He was young, apparently, mid-20s perhaps, but something about him made precise age estimation impossible, as if he existed slightly outside of normal time. His skin was pale to the point of translucency, so white it was almost gray, and I could trace the faint blue lines of veins at his temples, pulsing with a slow rhythm that did not quite match a normal heartbeat. His hair was black, slicked back beneath a small gray cap, the kind of cap hotel employees wore in the 1950s when such establishments still valued formality and presentation. His uniform was immaculate. Black vest, white shirt, red tie, all perfectly pressed, not a single wrinkle or stain anywhere. Pristine in a way that felt unnatural given the decay evident in the rest of the building. But his smile disturbed me most. It was too wide, stretching across his face like something painted on like a mask designed by someone who had only heard smiles described but had never actually seen one. The expression did not reach his eyes, did not move or change. It simply existed on his face, fixed and permanent. And his eyes, those eyes made my skin crawl. Brown irises, a normal enough color. But they did not blink. Not once in the entire time I looked at him. They remained fixed open, staring unblinking like the glass eyes of a taxidermied animal, like the eyes of something dead that was pretending to be alive. His name tag pinned to his vest read, "Thomas. Welcome to Motel New Hope Bowl," he said. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried clearly across the lobby. There was something hollow beneath the words, something empty like an echo in a well that had gone dry. "Do you require a room for the evening?" I swallowed hard, trying to calm my racing heart. "Yes, one night." How much Tomas tilted his head to the side. The motion was too slow, too deliberate, too controlled. It reminded me of a bird examining something it was considering eating. First, he said, "I must read you our establishment's rules." Before I could respond, before I could tell him I did not care about rules, I just wanted a bed and a few hours of sleep, he began reciting from a sign posted on the wall behind him. His voice was flat and mechanical, without inflection or emphasis, like a recording being played back. Rule number 1. Guests must not leave their rooms after midnight for any reason. Rule number 2. If you hear knocking at your door, do not open it regardless of what you hear. Rule number 3. Do not look into mirrors after 3 a.m. Rule number 4. If you witness anything unusual during your stay, close your eyes immediately and count slowly to 10. When you open them, it will be gone. Rule number 5. Do not enter the bathroom after midnight unless it is absolutely necessary. Rule number 6. If you hear a child crying, cover your ears immediately and sing a song. Any song will do. Rule number 7. The motel accepts no responsibility for losses of any kind, whether material, psychological, or spiritual. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. For him to laugh and tell me it was a joke, something to amuse the guests. He did not laugh. His smile did not waver. His eyes did not blink. What kind of rules are those, I finally asked. His smile widened just slightly, just enough to show teeth that were very white and very even. Standard safety protocols, sir, for your protection during your stay. Protection from what silence stretched between us. Tomas did not answer. He simply watched me with those unblinking eyes and that frozen smile, and the shadows in the corners of the lobby seemed to grow deeper. From things he finally said that you do not wish to encounter. Every survival instinct I possessed was screaming at me to leave, to turn around and walk out of this building and drive until I found somewhere else to sleep, even if that meant sleeping in my cab on the side of the road. Everything about this place was wrong. The empty parking lot, the peeling wallpaper, the smell of decay beneath cheap perfume, the clerk who did not blink and whose smile never wavered. But exhaustion had become a physical force, crushing my rational mind beneath its weight. I had been awake for nearly 20 hours. My body was shutting down. I needed sleep with a desperation that overrode fear, overrode instinct, overrode everything else. Fine, I said. Give me the key. Tomas reached beneath the counter and produced a key. Old bronze, tarnished with age, attached to a keychain, shaped like a smiling sun. But the sun's expression was wrong, twisted somehow, knowing as if it were keeping a secret, as if it found something amusing that I did not yet understand. Room 12, he said, end of the corridor. I do hope your stay proves interesting. I took the key, avoiding contact with his fingers, and turned toward the hallway that led deeper into the motel. I had taken perhaps 10 steps when I remembered. Wait, I said, turning back. I have not paid yet. How much? The counter was empty. Thomas had vanished, as if he had never been there at all. No sound of footsteps, no closing door, just absence where presence had been a moment before. I stood frozen, staring at the empty space behind the counter. The lamp still cast its anemic light. The bell still sat beside its faded sign. But the clerk was gone. The clock on the wall caught my attention. Old wood-framed with a white face and black hands. 11:13 p.m. I checked my phone. 11:13 p.m. I checked my wristwatch, the analog one that ran on mechanical gears. 11:13 p.m. At least I arrived at a reasonable hour, I thought, and the thought felt strange, even as I had it, as if it were not quite my own. I did not understand yet. I did not understand that the clock on the wall had stopped at 11:13 long ago, that its hands had not moved in years, perhaps decades. I did not understand that my time was about to stop as well. I turned back toward the hallway and began walking toward room 12, toward the darkness, waiting at the end of the corridor, toward something that had been patient for a very long time, something that was finally about to receive its guest. The corridor stretched before me like a throat preparing to swallow. From the lobby, the motel had appeared modest. A simple single-story building, perhaps 10 or 12 rooms at most. But the hallway that extended from the lobby entrance defied that impression entirely. It went on, far longer than the exterior dimensions could possibly allow, doors lining both walls in endless succession, numbered in faded gold paint that caught the dim light. I began counting as I walked. Room 1, room 2, room 3. The numbers climbed higher than they should have. 13, 17, 23, 28. I stopped counting after 35. The hallway still extended into darkness ahead of me. The carpet beneath my boots was thick and plush-colored, a deep red that seemed to absorb the light, the color of wine, the color of dried blood. And it was absolutely silent. My footsteps made no sound at all, as if the carpet were swallowing every vibration, as if I were walking on something that did not want to be heard. Wall sconces provided the only illumination brass fixtures that held bulbs so dim they barely deserved the name. They were spaced perhaps 15 feet apart, creating pools of sickly yellow light with stretches of shadow between them. When I walked through those dark intervals, the temperature dropped noticeably. Not much, perhaps 5 degrees, but enough to raise goosebumps on my arms, enough to make me walk faster to reach the next circle of light. But the doors disturbed me most. Every single one of them stood partially open. Room 1. The door gaped 3 inches, a vertical slice of darkness. Through that gap I could see nothing, just blackness, so complete it seemed solid. But I felt something. Awareness. The sensation of being watched from within that darkness of eyes I could not see, tracking my movement. I forced myself to keep walking. Room 2. Also ajar, perhaps 4 inches this time. From within came a sound that made me slow my steps, liquid dripping slowly, rhythmically. Drip, 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 like water falling from a damaged pipe into a basin. I told myself it was plumbing. Old buildings had such problems. Pipes corroded, seals failed, water found its way through. That was all. Drip, drip, drip. I walked faster. Room 4. Open wider than the previous ones. And as I passed, movement flickered at the edge of my vision, a shadow shifting in the darkness beyond the door. Something that had been still suddenly becoming animate. I stopped and stared at the gap, my heart pounding. Nothing moved. Just your imagination, I whispered to myself. The words felt hollow, unconvincing. Just exhaustion playing tricks. I continued walking, my pace increasing. Room 6. The door stood open nearly a foot wider than any before it. And from inside drifted a smell that stopped me in my tracks, sweet and heavy, the scent of fresh flowers, but wrong somehow. Too intense, too sweet, suffocating. Like arrangements surrounding a casket. Like bouquets left too long beside a corpse, their fragrance turning to something cloying and sick. I held my breath and hurried past, not looking through the gap. Room 8. The smell from this one was different. Old paper, dry and dusty. Something metallic beneath, like copper or iron. And the air leaking through the gap was warm, moist, like exhalation. Like something inside was breathing. Room 10. I was nearly running now, my boots still silent on that blood-colored carpet. The hallway continued to extend ahead of me, and I was beginning to wonder if it had an end at all, if I would just keep walking forever through this tunnel of open doors. But passing room 10, I stopped, despite every instinct screaming at me to keep moving. Sound emerged from within, whispering, soft voices speaking words I could not distinguish in a language I did not recognize. Multiple voices overlapping, rising and falling in patterns that suggested ritual, prayer perhaps, or chanting, or warning. I stood frozen, listening. The whispers continued at steady volume, never louder, never softer, the same phrases repeated endlessly in the darkness beyond the door. Then another sound joined them. Crying. A child crying. The sound was thin and high, unmistakably young. A little girl, perhaps, or a small boy. Sobbing in the darkness in terror or pain or despair, the kind of crying that speaks of genuine suffering. Tomas and his rules surfaced in my memory, his flat, mechanical voice reciting those impossible regulations. If you hear a child crying, cover your ears and sing a song. Any song will do. I did not cover my ears. I did not sing. I ran. Room 11. The door stood open wider than any of the others, nearly 2 feet of gap, revealing darkness beyond. And as I sprinted past, something compelled me to look. I saw a face just for a heartbeat. A pale oval floating in the blackness. Features suggested rather than defined. And 2 points of reflected light where eyes should have been reflected from what light source I could not say. Looking directly at me, meeting my gaze. Then the door swung closed. slowly, deliberately, without any visible cause. No hand pushing it, no draft to explain the movement. It simply closed as if the room were swallowing its contents, hiding them from view. I did not stop running until I reached the end of the corridor. Room 12, the only door that was completely closed. My hands shook so badly I needed 3 attempts to fit the key into the lock. The bronze was cold against my fingers, far colder than metal should be, at room temperature, cold enough that it almost hurt to hold, like it had been stored in a freezer, like it had never known warmth. The lock clicked. The door swung inward, hinges silent. I threw myself into the room and slammed the door shut behind me. My fingers found the deadbolt and threw it home, found the chain and secured it. Then I pressed my back against the wood, bracing myself as if something might try to force its way through. My heart hammered against my ribs. My breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat ran down my temples despite the cold that had followed me inside. For a long moment I simply stood there listening. Silence. No footsteps in the corridor outside, no whispers, no crying child, no doors opening or closing, just the sound of my own breathing and a faint electrical hum from somewhere I could not identify. Slowly keeping my back to the door, I turned my head to examine the room. It was normal, aggressively, mockingly normal. A single bed with crisp white sheets, neatly made with hospital corners, a wooden nightstand supporting a small lamp that cast a warm, ordinary glow. An old television set with a curved screen and manual dials technology I had not seen since childhood sitting on a low dresser. A window with thin curtains through which I could see the parking lot and my Peterbilt waiting faithfully in the darkness. And a small door on the far wall leading to what had to be the bathroom. Nothing frightening, nothing unusual. Just a motel room, generic and forgettable, indistinguishable from 1,000 other motel rooms in 1,000 other forgotten places. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. You're being ridiculous, I told myself. Old buildings, strange acoustics, your mind filling in details that are not there. That is all this is, nothing more. I did not believe it. Not really. But I was too exhausted to care anymore. I did not remove my jacket, did not untie my boots. I walked to the bed and collapsed onto the mattress, face first, still fully clothed. The bed was soft, far softer than any motel mattress had a right to be. It seemed to embrace me, to pull me down into its depths, like sinking into warm water, like being held, like being swallowed. I was unconscious within seconds. The nightmare came fast and vivid. I was in my truck again, the Peterbilt's engine roaring beneath me, the vibration traveling up through the seat and into my bones in that familiar way. The headlights cut through darkness ahead, illuminating the road in a cone of white light. But the road was wrong. The surface was not asphalt. It was red and wet, glistening in the headlight beams like exposed muscle. Something squelched beneath my tires as I drove something that yielded too easily, something organic and alive. And standing along both shoulders of this nightmare road were figures, dozens of them, hundreds, lined up in endless rows, motionless, watching. They had the general shape of human beings, head, shoulders, torso, limbs, but their details were wrong. Where faces should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth expanses of darkness like holes cut in the fabric of reality. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just void. They were watching me. I could feel their attention, like physical pressure against my skin, even though they had nothing to watch with. Then one of them stepped onto the road. It moved directly into my path, that featureless void turning toward my approaching truck. I tried to brake, tried to swerve, but my body would not respond to my commands. My hands were locked on the wheel, my foot frozen above the pedal. I was going to hit it. At the last instant, the figure raised its head, and features began to emerge from that void, a face coalescing out of nothing, becoming visible, becoming real, a child's face, round and soft with the features of an infant. But wrong. The head was too large, swollen, distorted. The skin was gray-white, the color of something dead. And the eyes were enormous. bulging from their sockets like eggs about to hatch. Pure white, no iris, no pupil, just glistening white shot through with red veins. The mouth opened, it screamed. I woke, gasping, lurching upright with my heart trying to tear its way out of my chest. The room was dark. The lamp on the nightstand had gone out. The television screen showed only black glass. Even the faint glow from the window seemed diminished, as if something were filtering the moonlight, drinking it down. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to slow my breathing, trying to convince my heart that there was no danger, that it had only been a dream. Then I heard it. Knock, 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 from the bathroom. I turned my head slowly, every muscle in my body going tense. The bathroom door was closed. I was certain it had been closed when I entered the room, but now there was something behind it, something that wanted my attention. Knock, 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 deliberate, measured. 3 impacts, evenly spaced, like someone requesting permission to emerge. Tomas and his rules flooded back. If you hear knocking, do not open the door, regardless of what you hear. But that rule had referenced the hallway door, had it not? Someone knocking from outside the room. This was different. This was the bathroom. This was inside. Something was inside with me. "Who is there?" I called out. My voice sounded thin and reedy in the darkness. Weak, afraid, silence. Then the knocking resumed. Harder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, fumbling in the darkness, and activated the screen. The bright rectangle of light seemed obscene in the blackness, too harsh, too real. The time display stopped my breath. 11:13 p.m. I stared at the numbers, my mind refusing to process them. I had been asleep for hours. I was certain of it. It had to be well past midnight, perhaps approaching dawn. I checked my wristwatch, the analog one that ran on gears and springs and needed no battery. 11:13 p.m. Time had stopped. Knock, 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 knock. The knocking became frantic, continuous, someone or something beating against the wood with desperate urgency or fury. I could not tell which. I stood up from the bed. My feet touched the carpet and I recoiled. The floor was ice cold, cold enough to feel through my boot soles, cold enough to make my bones ache. I took a step toward the bathroom door. Do not open it. The rules said not to open it, but the rules were about external doors, about things trying to get in. This was different. This was something already inside, something that had been here before I arrived. I had to know. My hand reached out and closed around the doorknob. The metal was so cold it burned my palm. I gasped, but did not release it. I turned the knob. I pushed the door open. What I saw on the other side made every thought in my head go silent. The bathroom was wrong. Not simply wrong, impossible. A violation of every physical law I understood. From the outside, from the room, it should have been small. A standard motel bathroom, perhaps 6 feet by 8 feet, containing the basic fixtures, toilet, sink, shower. Nothing more. That was what the door suggested. That was what logic demanded. But the space beyond that door stretched into infinity. The walls were too far apart, 20 feet, 30 feet, I could not tell. The ceiling was too high, lost in darkness that seemed to begin about 10 feet up and extend forever. I could not see where the room ended. It simply continued, swallowed by shadow, extending into a distance that should not exist within the confines of a single-story motel. The floor was wrong, too. Not tile, as I would expect. Something else, something wet. Something that squelched under my boot when I took an involuntary step forward, crossing the threshold without meaning to. I looked down. The surface was covered in a thin layer of dark liquid, viscous and slow-moving, reflecting what little light there was, like oil. The smell struck me next, and I nearly gagged. Mildew, first heavy and damp, the kind that gets into your lungs and makes every breath feel thick. Then copper, the unmistakable scent of blood, fresh and metallic. And beneath both of those, something worse. The sweet, nauseating stench of decomposition, of meat left too long in the sun, of death. The air was hot, humid. It pressed against my skin like a wet towel, making each breath an effort. Sweat broke out on my forehead, immediately mixing with the cold that still clung to me from the room behind. And there were sounds, water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Slow and steady, metronomic. A low electrical hum barely audible like current running through ancient wires. And something else. Something that raised every hair on my body. Moaning, not human moaning, not animal either. Something in between, something deeper than either. The sound of prolonged suffering of agony extended beyond endurance. The voice of something that had been in pain for a very long time. I pulled out my phone and activated the flashlight. The beam penetrated only a few feet before being absorbed. Not fading gradually as light should, but being swallowed, consumed by darkness that seemed almost solid. I could see perhaps 3 feet ahead. Beyond that was nothing but black. But in those 3 feet I could see things that made me want to turn and run. The walls were concrete gray and cracked moisture seeping through in trails that looked like tears. And there were stains. Brownish red streaks running from ceiling to floor, handprints, dozens of them, hundreds perhaps in different sizes, some large adult-sized, some small child-sized, all of them made with something I did not want to identify, something that had dried dark and flaky. I took another step forward. The moaning grew louder. I should have turned back. I know that now. I should have closed the door and run from the room and driven until the sun came up. But something was pulling me forward. Not curiosity, something darker, something deeper, like a hook embedded in my chest, dragging me toward whatever was making that sound. The bathroom kept extending. I walked for what felt like minutes, but time had lost meaning. My phone light showed only small circles of horror, more stains, more handprints, something that looked like scratch marks gouged into the concrete as if by fingernails. The darkness pressed from every direction. The moaning echoed off walls I could not see. Then I saw it, a shape in the blackness, something pale against the void, large, much larger than any person. I raised my phone higher. The light fell upon a bathtub, old-fashioned, the kind with claw feet, white porcelain that had yellowed with age, stained in places with something dark. It sat in the center of the impossible room like an altar awaiting sacrifice. The tub was filled with liquid, black and thick like tar, like old blood. The surface rippled slightly as if something beneath was stirring, and draped over the edge I saw a hand, small, pale, thin fingers with nails that were black and sharp. One hand, then another, then another. 5 hands, all identical, all gripping the porcelain rim. Then the head rose from the black water. I stopped breathing. I stopped thinking. I simply stared, because what I was witnessing should not exist. What I was witnessing violated every law of nature, every rule of biology, every concept of the possible. It had the shape of an infant's head, round, soft, the general contours of innocence. But it was the size of a beach ball, swollen, distended. The skin stretched so thin over the skull that I could see dark veins beneath threading across the surface like worms burrowing through flesh. The face retained infant features, a small nose, thin lips, the suggestion of cheeks. But the proportions were wrong. Everything was wrong. And the eyes were what I still see when I close my own at night. They were enormous, the size of baseballs. They bulged from their sockets, barely contained by straining red tendons, looking ready to burst free at any moment. The entire surface of each eye was white, no iris, no pupil, just milky white, marbled with blood vessels that pulsed with slow rhythm. And those eyes were looking at me, seeing me, recognizing me. The mouth opened, no teeth inside, just a black cavity that seemed to descend forever, a tunnel into darkness, a void within a void. From that opening came the moaning, louder now, vibrating in my chest, in my skull, in my bones. My phone light flickered, then died. Darkness consumed everything, and in that darkness I heard movement. The wet, heavy sound of something massive dragging itself from the tub. Squelch, 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 coming toward me. My body refused to obey, legs locked, arms frozen at my sides. Terror had shut down every system except my hearing, which now seemed supernaturally acute, picking up every tiny sound in that vast darkness. Squelch, squelch, closer. I felt vibrations through the floor, felt the approach of something large and heavy. Squelch. Something touched my ankle, cold, wet, small fingers with sharp nails digging into my skin through my jeans, gripping, and suddenly I could move. I screamed and tore myself free and ran. Blind in the darkness, hands stretched before me, I fled. I collided with walls, my shoulders slamming into concrete. I tripped over objects I could not see, stumbling, catching myself. The viscous floor was slippery and I fell hard, my chin striking concrete, my teeth clacking together, the taste of blood filling my mouth. Behind me I heard it, not fast. The body was too large for speed, but relentless. Squelch. Squelch, squelch, following, and something else. A sound worse than the moaning. Laughter. A child's laughter. High and sweet and utterly wrong in this nightmare. I scrambled to my feet and kept running. Then I saw it light, a thin line of yellow ahead of me. The door. The bathroom door. I did not question how it appeared. I knew, was absolutely certain, that it had not been there before, that I had walked for what felt like forever into an infinite space. But I did not care. I ran toward it with everything I had. Behind me, the squelching accelerated. The laughter grew louder. I reached the door and threw myself through it. I was in the motel room again. The normal room. The bed, the nightstand, the window. I spun and slammed the bathroom door shut. Bang! Something struck the door from the other side. Hard bang, bang, bang. The wood shuddered in its frame. The hinges groaned. I pressed my back against it, adding my weight, bracing myself. But the door held. The banging continued for what felt like hours. Maybe it was minutes. Time had become meaningless. Then slowly it faded, grew weaker, stopped. Silence returned. I stood there with my back against the door, soaked in sweat and slime and blood from my split chin, listening to my own ragged breathing. On my ankle, where those fingers had grabbed me, I felt wetness. I looked down. 5 deep scratches, red and raw. Blood seeping from each one. Evidence. I did not hesitate. I ran to the window, threw it open, and climbed out into the night. The parking lot. My truck. Escape. I sprinted across gravel, my injured ankle screaming with each step. I climbed into the cabin, slammed the door, engaged the locks. My hands trembled so violently it took 5 attempts to insert the key. The engine roared to life. I shifted into gear and floored the accelerator. The Peterbilt lurched forward, tires spraying gravel, and I drove out of that lot like something from hell was pursuing me. Maybe it was. In the rearview mirror, I watched the motel shrink, and I saw something that stopped my blood. The building was changing, collapsing, folding in on itself like a dying organism. Walls cracked and fell. The neon sign sparked and went dark. The entire structure seemed to sink into the ground. And in the window of room 12, a face watched me go. Tomas. But no longer Tomas. His face was melting, sliding off his skull like heated wax, revealing something beneath, something with enormous wide eyes. I looked away and did not look back again. The road stretched ahead, empty and dark. My dashboard clock read 11:13 p.m. Time remained frozen. I drove through darkness so complete it felt solid. The headlights illuminated perhaps 30 feet of road before being swallowed. No stars above, no moon, just void. My hands would not steady themselves on the wheel. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors, expecting to see that melting face. The scratches on my ankle throbbed with my pulse, 5 parallel wounds still bleeding. I wanted to believe I was dreaming, but the pain was too sharp, the blood too real. The road continued, mile after mile of nothing. I checked the dashboard clock, 11:13 p.m., my phone, 11:13 p.m., my wristwatch, 11:13 p.m. Nothing was moving forward. Nothing except my truck. I do not know how long I drove like that. Then I saw something ahead, a figure on the road, a woman in a white dress, long dark hair, skin too pale, standing motionless. I stopped the truck. "Hello," I called out. "Are you all right?" No response. I stepped down from the cab. The temperature plummeted. My breath plumed white. I approached slowly. Her dress was torn, stained with something dark. Her feet were bare and dirty. Her face had been beautiful once, but her eyes were wrong. Open, staring, empty, like glass in a mannequin's head. She opened her mouth, wider than it should go, revealing too many teeth. A sound emerged, not words, not a scream, something between, something that vibrated in my skull. Then she sank into the ground. Like the asphalt had become water, she dropped straight down. Her shoulders, her chin, her empty eyes. In seconds she was gone. The road was solid beneath my feet. I ran back to my truck and drove. Eventually the darkness lifted. Time began moving again. I found a gas station. A young man behind the counter looked at me with alarm. Jesus, man. Are you okay? What time is it? 5:30 in the morning? And the date, Sunday, March 17th. I asked about the motel. There is no motel out this way, he said. This road has been abandoned for years. I have worked here for 3 years. There's no motel called New Hope Bowl. I looked down at my ankle. 5 scratches, still bleeding. Not a story, not imagination. Real. That night I stood before the bathroom mirror in my apartment. I had showered, changed clothes, bandaged the scratches. I stared at my reflection. Then I saw it, behind me. Over my left shoulder, a shadow, darker than it should be, moving, drifting closer. I spun around, nothing there. I turned back to the mirror. The shadow was still there. Closer now, almost touching my shoulder. I slammed the light switch and left the bathroom in darkness. I did not return until morning. 3 years have passed. I still drive trucks. I still live alone. Carmen married someone else. My mother passed away. I did not make it back to Tijuana in time. The scratches healed into scars, 5 white lines. When the weather turns cold, they burn. I stop looking in mirrors after dark, but it does not matter, because every night at exactly 11:13 p.m., my phone buzzes. The same message, every single night. Motel New Hope Bowl welcomes you back. Room 12 is waiting. I have changed phones, changed numbers. The messages keep coming. Last week the message changed. Room 12 is waiting, not much longer now. Last night I found out what that meant. I was lying in bed. 11:12 p.m., 1 minute before the message. 11:13 p.m. My phone buzzed. Then I heard something else, from the bathroom. Knock, knock, knock. The same rhythm, the same sound. I lay frozen. Knock, knock, knock. Louder. The knocking continued until dawn. When morning came, I walked to the bathroom. On the mirror, written in something black and wet, I found you. I wiped it away, but I could still see it, faintly, like it had been etched into the glass. Tonight I am writing this down. I do not know if I will exist tomorrow, but I need someone to know. If you ever drive through the California desert at night, if you see a motel that should not exist, neon lights flickering, a sign reading New Hope Bowl, do not stop. Keep driving, no matter how tired you are, because once you enter, part of you never leaves, and eventually the rest follows. It is 11:12 p.m. now, 1 minute until the message. I am sitting on my bed facing the bathroom door. I can hear something behind it, not knocking this time, breathing, slow, heavy, wet. My phone buzzes. I look at the screen. Now, the bathroom door begins to open, slowly, inch by inch. Darkness beyond, deeper than it should be, moving. A hand emerges, small, pale. 5 fingers with black nails. Then another hand, and another. 5 hands, pulling something through, something large, something wet. The head emerges, that enormous head, that infant face, those white eyes. It remembers me. The mouth opens, it speaks. Eduardo, you came back. I knew you would. What are you? I am what waits. I am what remains. I am what lives in spaces between. It drags itself closer. I was like you once, lost, tired, looking for rest. I found the motel. I found room 12, and room 12 found me. It changed me, made me this, made me the keeper, the one who welcomes others home. I will not go back. The creature stops. You do not understand. You're already there. You never left. Part of you has been in room 12 since the night you arrived. The room around me begins to change. Walls crack, paint peels. Behind them, something else appears. Wallpaper with blue flowers on yellow. A small chandelier. A window overlooking an empty parking lot where a burgundy Peterbilt waits. Room 12. I never left. The creature is beside me now, its hand on my ankle fitting perfectly over the scars. Welcome home, Eduardo. The last thing I see is the clock on the wall, 11:13 p.m. Forever. If you are reading this, I have one final warning. The motel exists, waiting, patient. It does not chase. It does not hunt. It only needs you to stop, to rest, to close your eyes. And when you open them, you will be in room 12, where something waits in the bathroom, something that used to be human. Check your clock. What time does it show? If it reads 11:13, it is already too late. The door's opening. And room 12 is ready for its next guest.